started now.
When he starts, when he gets back, we'll go to work.
If you plan on speaking tonight, please make sure you fill out one of these cards and you can get it from our city secretary on the end.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me open a regular meeting of the City Council, City of Pearland for March the 2nd, 2020. I can't believe that. Moving in our agenda, and I'll use the same agenda that you have. Item 1 is called to order, which I just did. And if you'll please stand, we'll have an invocation tonight by Councilmember Moore, and Councilmember Alonda will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
If you would, please bow your head. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for allowing us to gather here tonight. We ask that you watch over each and every one of us as travel back home tonight. We ask that you give us the wisdom to all of your will. We also ask you to allow us to know the things that we can control and the things that we can't control, the ones that are in your hands, Lord. Also, we ask that you guide us down the path that you see fit for us to be guided down. We ask all of this in your name.
If you'll please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Well, I appreciate your being here tonight as we go through the agenda, which the next item is roll call. And we have two of our council members absent tonight, Councilmember Hernandez and Councilmember Perez. And then moving down to item number 4 on our agendas, which is citizen comments, I'll ask Councilmember Little or Mayor Pro Tem for communication.
Thank you, Mayor. We've got quite a few that wish to speak tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and just say this for everyone. When you approach the podium, state your name and address. You have 3 minutes. I'll let you know when you get down to 30 seconds. Please try to limit your talk to 3 minutes. We've got one general comment, and then we're going to do those citizens that wish to speak on agenda item number 1, new business. So up on just general comments is Felicia Harris.
Do I have to shut this? Sure.
You hear it? Yeah, we can hear that.
Before you start the clock, I'd like to give council something. 5 of you tonight, so I'll just keep a couple of these. One more?
Una Moss, back here.
Oh,
Thanks. Oh, thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Council Felicia Harris Haas, live at 3112 Sumac Drive in Pearland. I'm here this evening to talk about something that relates to new business items number 1 and number 2, but is not directly on point. So I wanted to address you in citizen comment if I might. It's a budget item. As I was looking at some of these issues that came up in the last couple of weeks, one of the things that caught my attention is the fact that we had a rate increase as of October 1, 2019, and another one on January 1, 2020. As I dug in a little bit, and again, I'm an outsider at this, so I'm digging from a higher wall than you, but I'll tell you what I found and what my request will be. What I found is that in the 2019-2020 budget, the statements were made to council from staff that water revenues for fiscal year 19 did not meet expectations with a series of very wet weeks dampening consumption. What that statement, that's a quote, what that statement suggests to me is that your revenues were down because of heavy rainfall in 2019. I would suggest that perhaps that might not have been the case in light of the new information that came up over the last couple of weeks, actually about a month or so. Anyways, on the same page, it says for the fund, a few notable highlights include building from a 0% rate increase for fiscal year 19 and a, quote, moderate 1.6 revenue increase is necessary for upcoming fiscal year 20. There was a postscript on the very next page of the budget, which says in bold, September 30th, 2019 postscript, the budget was adopted essentially as recommended with changes in the water and sewer rate structure only. As I dug in a little bit further, what I found on page 103 of the budget documents was a statement that said this, fiscal year 2020 budgeted revenues total 60 million and some change, and that is a 6.2 million increase from the fiscal year 2019 projections. Seems kind of interesting that that 6 million increase relates very closely to the $6 million that we've been talking about over the last few weeks. Then it says water and sewer charges increased about 5.6 million, 5.7 depending on how you round up. And that this, quote, this is mainly due to a 1.6 rate increase and a change to the rate multiplier, an anticipated increase in customer growth of 2.5%, and an increase in contributions from the impact fee funds. On the page 101, what it says is that for fiscal year 2020, a water and sewer revenue increase of 1.6 will generate about 2.9 million from growth and another 770,000 from rate adjustments. That's around roughly $3.5 million related to the rate increase that went into effect on October 1 and January 1. So then I question, why two rate increases through one budget cycle? And so as I dug in a little bit further, what I found is this, is that council passed the rate increases on September 23rd, about a week before the end of the fourth quarter, and they took effect about 7 days later. That's interesting. When I was on council, we never passed two rate increases in one budget cycle or something like this, and so that strikes me as odd. Seems to suggest that somebody knew there was a deficit in or around the summer of 2019 and didn't, and perhaps maybe even knew it was related to the issues that are on the table tonight, new business items 1 and number 2, but failed to
seconds.
bring it to council's attention. Lastly, when I went and started looking at my bills, questioning, whether or not there were any overcharges in light of Mr. Branson's presentations, what I found is that in 2019, the new rate, $15.78 for the base charge, was applied beginning in October, but it actually began before October.
Time.
May I finish just briefly? 30 seconds.
Go a little longer.
What I see on my bill, and I'm happy to give these to you, I have all of the bills for 2018 rates and all the bills for 2019 rates. There's 14 pages in total, and I haven't gotten the last bill for 2019 yet. 14 pages for 18, 14 pages for 19. Anyways, back to the rate increase. On my bill for September 27th through October 26th, I was charged a base rate under the new code that began on October 1. So as I see it, every consumer who got a base rate charge prior to the effective date of the rate charge is owed at least some money back from the city, or at least a discount on something. So we were overcharged. In addition, I'm going to submit these two packets. Like I said, there's 14 pages in each. By my count, and I will submit that I'm not an expert, but by my count, I paid 12.5 months of base rates for 2018 water, and I'm about to pay 12.5 months of base rate for 2019 water, and I still have one more invoice or bill coming to me for 2019. The question to council is you're going through the budget cycle now. I would ask the council consider this information in light of the issues before you, and consider this. If staff proposed a rate increase to catch up on lost revenues to the tune of about $6 million, and staff is proposing that you continue catching up on that $6 million loss by billing all of the rate customers, whether or not at least a portion of the $6 million that you're trying to catch up on through the billing of the usage, which they said was not used, is a double billing to the customers that are using your water. Thank you.
That's all the general comments, Mayor. We'll wait till we get to the specific agenda item
Okay.
for the rest.
Moving in our agenda to item number 5, public hearings. I heard none tonight. Moving to item number 6, which is a consent agenda. And I would like to ask Councilmember Orlando if he would present the consent agenda with us. It's only one item tonight.
Consideration and possible action resolution number R 2020-46, so moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in. Council have any question or comment on this item? I don't think it. No one told it. With this, it's a council discussion. Adams, huh? You have some discussion? Okay, fine, but.
Yeah. It's just some things I'd like to get some input on the engineering side of this. These engineering firms, we're looking at 21% of the engineering fee on this contract. And inspections is running about 8%. And not that much on geotechnical, but it just seems like on engineering and inspections that, you know, you're almost 30% of the contract construction value, and that just seems like it's pretty high.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, we're talking about the consent agenda item regarding the AFA amendment. Specifically, what this is doing is we're recommending that we terminate an existing AFA agreement that was signed back in June of 2015 and approve the new AFA for the Smith Ranch Road widening project. The new agreement reflects really what this is it reflects changes to the civil rights compliance language and non-discrimination statutes that have been revised from the federal funding allocated to this project. As you may recall, the city's portion of this particular project is only 20%. And again, on this item, we're just recommending that we replace the old agreement in its entirety, requiring, or we're recommending the new agreement, which would replace the old agreement in its entirety, and then move forward with the new agreement, terminate the old agreement. That's really all this is. All of this has already been negotiated through TxDOT, and this is just a change in the agreement from one agreement to the next.
Yeah, I understand that and where you're at on that. I'm just questioning some of the numbers that are on here to that. And I don't know if you can go down to page 24 of this. Can you scroll down through there? Put it up on the screen. When we look at that on the engineering side, the cost 274, and then on the 80%. But I guess on this one, when we're looking at it going across, you get the local participation on it, the state participation on it, the federal, which they don't do anything on that one at all. So we had a total of 274,668 total. And when you look at the state's participation of 219,734, our part is 54,934. Is that a correct statement?
As per the AFA, that's a correct statement.
Well, when you go down further on that, it gives a total price on the local funding of 1,400,000 or 1,040,899 on there when we figure out what the local cost is on that. And it just seems like it's a little bit kilter one side to the other, but I know that what we're trying to do within this total funding is quite a bit more than that. Is one of the problems is on this is that the city funds up front, Brent, and then we return money out of the feds and out of the state.
We're doing a local management of this project, and so we don't give any money to the state. We pay the money directly to our consulting firms as well as the contractors when we get to construction, and then we get reimbursed by TxDOT for the federal or state participation.
So we have the money up front, right? And then we'll get refunded out of
We pay up front directly. We hire the consultants, we hire the contractor, we pay them up front, and as we work through the project monthly, as we reconcile all the expenditures, we turn those costs into TxDOT, and once they get approved through TxDOT, they reimburse us throughout the project.
Okay, so that's what comes up to being the higher number in the overall contract. So we had to come up with a higher amount of money to come in and fund this up front in that. And I guess a couple of other things. I don't remember when we put this out if we mentioned who the prime engineering firm was and if their side. I know that we, on some of the federal money, we have to look at the minority contractors and minority subs on the firm. But I don't remember who we had as the local or the firm coming in to do the design.
I think it's listed in the packet here that it's Dannenbaum Engineering.
Okay, and did we have the subs in there? I know we got one geotech and surveying possibly.
It's got all the subs in there. It's got environmental subs. It's got the geotech. It's got the land acquisition firm. And I believe it has the material testing in that one as well.
Okay, all right. That was what I was wanting to find out on that. But that's, so we have to pay up front on this, and then we'll get the funding back in from the federal side and from the state side.
Yes, sir. And we're years into the design of this project. We started the design several years ago, so that this is not, those contracts are awarded. We're well underway. The project's environmentally cleared, and this is just because of some of the funds that were applied to the project, and then some actions that were inadvertently taken between HGAC and TxDOT on some of those funds. We had to go back through a transportation improvement program and a statewide transportation improvement program, and then the unified transportation program there had to be modifications to all those through HGAC and TxDOT, and then it went to FHWA once all that was approved. In the end, all we did was change the funding source from the feds and the state from what it originally was, and then this is just a replacement of the original advanced funding agreement we had with TxDOT. The dollars are exactly the same as far as what we're getting from TxDOT.
Okay, well, the only thing, when you look at it at face value, you see a lot of money from the city side, and it comes out a lot more than what the 20% is. But anyway, if we're paying up front and they're refunding us on that, that makes a lot of sense to do that.
Well, I think what we'd see here is a total project number in the AFA of $5.13 million, and the city's putting in just under $1 million.
Yeah.
For the FAA, we're responsible for any overruns over the original amount of funds we were awarded for the project. But as far as the original participation amount, we were putting in about $1 million, and the state and the feds about they were putting in a total of about 4.2.
Okay. Yeah, and so when they refund us, what account does that go back into, offhand?
I'll ask
Is there
our
a-
finance folks, but I believe it goes back into our debt fund to pay off any bonds that we've sold in the past for transportation projects.
Yeah, because some of this was brought up the last time on some additional funds that were utilized, but I know that when we come up with these different funds that need into the projects, that we have an underrun, and then what we do is accumulate some of those underruns to go on other projects to build those through there. So we'd have an account set up to come back and put the refunding back from the state and the feds through there on this, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
That's good. I think this is a good case where when you finally get an approval from the Houston Galveston Area Council and the Highway Department on projects, and this one was finalized in 2013, a lot of things have happened with legislation that they have put us on a long range, although they approved the contract, it was something like 2019 to 2021 before we could actually start the construction on it. But to change things like civil rights and environmental and things of that type that have taken place since this time. So with that information record, does the council have any other questions or comments on this? Hearing none, Madam Secretary, I believe we've got a motion second on the floor before us.
Councilmember Orlando?
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Little? Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Moving in our agenda to new business, item number 1. As we get ready for this, I believe we have some citizens that would like to speak, and would you address those issues, Councilmember?
Thank you, Mayor. First on the list, Denise Hewitt.
Good evening, council, city staff, and special thank you to the concerned citizens here this evening. Once again, I find myself standing in this forum for the 4th week in a row, which was...
Name and address, please.
Oh, sorry. Denise Hewitt, 3404 Blue Spruce Trail. Figured y'all knew me by now. Once again, I find myself standing in this forum for the 4th week in a row. I have no confidence or trust in the senior city management, and I don't know if I can affect any change, but here goes anything. I'm calling for the city council to initiate a full independent investigation of the city financials, preferably performed by county or state government agency in conjunction with a national auditing firm, Deloitte or Price Waterhouse, including but not limited to the 28-day Reed cycle debacle, as I've so affectionately coined it. Why? 1, the water Reed cycle was changed to 28 days, resulting in 26 days of gapped unbilled usage over a 1.5-year time frame, $6 million revenue deficit, 12% difference. In normal business, you'd be out of business. The city senior management believes we should be satisfied that the employee responsible for changing the system was terminated, I suspect under a severance NDA. I've personally worked with this individual, and I do not, once again, do not believe that she acted alone or carelessly. I believe that she was scapegoated and silenced. 2, unbilled revenue was accrued in a monthly basis and allowed to go unreconciled for 1.5 years. It was stated last week that an investigation took place once the stranded accruals were discovered. I do not believe that this was an investigation. I believe that there was a review done to determine root cause. That's it, nothing more. 3, the 2nd February billing was inadvertently distributed. I'll never believe that it was by accident. You're not going to get me to buy we have another employee running loose with scissors theory. I believe this person was instructed just as was a 28-day employee casualty. This was a planned billing with an express purpose for recouping loss. 4, when pressed, the city came up with a plan that included 3 billing options and a communication plan. Quite funny after the horse was out of the barn. Option C was offered to allow customers to pay off the amount owed. Last week, the water department vacillated whether or not they could actually calculate and report that figure. So this makes me ponder how the $6 million deficit was derived. My speculation at this point was a simple calculation of planned versus actual. No factors, other factors were taken into consideration. And now after Ms. Haas's revelation, I'm really quite baffled. I don't believe the developed plan was anything other than the means of recouping revenue that was willfully and carelessly lost. 5, I suggest the city make a claim against their professional liability insurance, changing the billing to 28 days without downstream considerations, and the weak budget oversight are perfect examples for claims regarding errors and omissions. When pressed by council about a claim, City Manager Clay Pearson was very quick to respond that there was no loss. If there wasn't a loss due to employee misjudgment and fiscal irresponsibility that allowed the revenue deficit to grow to $6 million, tell me what was that? 6, I shared that I had reached out to the Public Utility Commission with the express purpose of pushing for governance intervention in the form of an investigative audit of the
30
entire
seconds.
water department, not exclusive of the water billing issue. Next, I went to the office of the Texas Attorney General and sought guidance on how to have the state investigate the city. I have a defined plan, and I'm waiting to see the city's next step to remedy this debacle. For all city council members who do not want to move forward with an independent outside investigation, it makes me have to ponder, what are you concerned about? What are we hiding? We have 2 prior council members, one who is current mayoral candidate, who have already called you for an independent investigation. I don't believe that you can ignore this request any longer, and I request you put it up for vote tonight. Council, I'm sorry that you're in this situation. It's time to go to work.
Thank you. Felicia Harris.
Last week, we spoke after the presentation by a city staff. May I speak after his presentation?
If that's your preference.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
That's your preference.
It is, sir.
Okay. Arne Fulton Droughton. I apologize if I mispronounced your name.
Hello, my name is Arne Fulton Drawhan, 3107 Centennial Village Drive, Pearland, Texas, 77584. I am the previous assistant manager of utility billing that was mentioned at the February 24th council meeting as being solely responsible for changing the reading calendar. This is the furthest from the truth. In June of 2018, I became the interim assistant manager of utility billing. In July of 2018, I, along with 2 other members of UB management, were instructed to personally respond to almost 200 customer complaints via council contact, emails, and Facebook posts. In response to a large number of complaints being due to fluctuating reading cycles, a directive came from administration via John Branson to get the reads in the 28 to 30-day range. Witnesses to this include former UB manager, now current assistant manager Elizabeth Ayala, finance director Cynthia Pearson, and public works director Clarence Whitworth, among others. I, along with the billing specialist and public works meter reading division, met and did just as we were told. In August of 2018, the month that I became permanent in the department. To suggest that I alone changed the reading calendar without communicating such with anyone is absurd. I assure you all that I am not coming forward as a disgruntled ex-employee. Although I resigned effective November 15, 2019 for a completely unrelated reason, it is documented that I intended to resign this very month so that I could go ahead and live my best life, which I have been doing, just that. But I could not stand by and let my hard work and my name be tarnished. Among the city's core values are trust, respect, integrity, and ownership. It is very clear that none of these values have been upheld in regards to this matter.
Thank you. Jeff Hunkel.
Well, my name is Jeff Hunkley, 3912 Oakwood Drive in Pearland, Texas. So here we are again, another Monday night to talk about the water bill. Unfortunately, I can't be lucky enough to hit the lottery, but I was lucky enough to be in cycle 11 to get double billed. But I got an extra special bonus in my bill. I received a water bill on February 5th for $84.44. I have auto pay, and on February 6th, my credit card was billed $84.44. I received my next bill on February 24th with a new amount of $96.42. On this same bill, it also included the previous amount that was just paid, $84.44. So now I have a grand total of $180.86. Now I have to wait for the March bill to see if the balance continues to grow, or was this just another error in the process? So not only are we behind 2 months in collecting the $6 million, but now I'm being billed on water that I clearly paid. But wait, there's actually more. So on my second bill, I was bumped into a higher water tier, and now I get to pay the higher rate. So, so let's talk about how we could have caught this error early. So I deal in the IT sector, and when we make a change to a software, we all know it's going to affect our users, so we monitor the change over time to see the consequences. This way, we can address issues earlier rather than later, and we can quickly resolve it. So when I was entering my water bill from 2018 until now, I had a simple Excel calculation that showed the difference between the read date and the billing rate was increasing over time. If there was a simple range validation in place where you set the delta threshold, this difference would have alerted someone an issue is occurring and getting worse. Because in 5 months, the difference already increased by 20%. Or maybe someone was already alerted and nothing was done about it until the complaint started coming in. This simple validation needs to be part of a billing system, and if you continue to say the system can't do this or the system can't do that, you either bought the wrong billing system or the operators need to read the manual to find out what safeguards can be put into place to alert these errors before 2 years later. Also, it was stated this error was caught during a yearly audit in the second year. But if the audits are done yearly, why wasn't this caught during the first year's audit? I understand where we are now, and we're trying to fix
30
it.
seconds.
But these are simple measures that need to be in place so this never happens again, and we can go back to focusing on other issues in our city. I know the software you keep discussing says it can't do one thing or another. Usually they're tied to a SQL backend where you can run SQL queries and get any information that you want and slice it and dice it in any manner and report on it correctly. So I'm hoping that that's the direction that the council is going to actually look into. Thank you.
Thank you. Jimmy Davis.
That completes them? Okay. At this point, I'll ask John Branson to report from staff position.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council members, citizens of Pearland, and Pearland staff. Appreciate this opportunity to go over this agenda item with you. What I want to do is briefly talk about what we discussed at the February 17th meeting, what we discussed at the February 24th meeting, recap the issue at hand, clarify misconceptions, talk about plan options that we discussed at the last meeting. That is Plan Option B, 3230 plan. Plan Option B, this was actually introduced by some of the council members at the last meeting and at the February 17th meeting, a 3430 plan that we'll discuss a little bit about. Last meeting, we also talked about the bill, the full amount due plan, and then there was discussion about a hybrid of option B and C. When I'm done with this presentation, I'm going to provide a recommendation on how I believe we should proceed, briefly talk about a communication plan, and then we'll have council and staff discussion. So at the February 17th and the 24th meeting, we explained the billing delay issue. At the 17th meeting, we received from you a consensus to move forward with the 3230 plan. At the February 24th meeting, we discussed the 3230 plan. We discussed the bill, the full amount due plan, the introduction of the 3430 plan, and then the discussion about the combination of B and C, the hybrid option. We also discussed at that meeting, we talked about the tier structure and how we would recommend amending that if we went to the 3230 plan. So background on this particular issue, what we did is back in July of 2018, we changed from the standard 28 to 32 day read cycle and made a conscious effort to normalize the reading period to 28 days on average. And you may recall at last meeting, we did have one of the residents that stood up and talked about how the delay, or excuse me, the billing cycle was all over the place. It was between 28 and 32, and there were some additional days up above, and there was citizen concern about that. So we met internally and we discussed moving forward with a 28-day billings, excuse me, a 28-day read cycle in order to normalize the read cycle. What actually happened at that time was we stayed on the monthly billing cycle. And I contend that that was a good idea and a good decision at that time initially to stay on that monthly billing cycle, because what that ensured was that customers did not receive a 13th bill. Then they would have been charged for an additional base consumption rate. So initially that was a good decision, and we stayed on the monthly billing. So what happened was we moved up the read cycle every 28 days, and the billing cycle stayed here on the monthly basis. So over time, the read cycle outpaced the billing cycle, and we're at the situation where we are now. And this is a representation of what transpired with the normal 28 to 32 day read cycle and billing 10 to 15 days on the monthly schedule afterwards. We were on average 10 to 15 days from the time that we read to the time that we actually billed. You look on your right, when we changed to the read cycle, where we read every 28 days on average and then billed on the monthly cycle, you can see that over time it went up to where we are today, 2 months in arrears. I want to point to you right here. This represents the 30-day time period. Roughly a year ago, we were out 30 days from the time that we read to the time that we billed. This is the time when we should have changed the read schedule at that point, and we didn't do it, and that's on us. I say the read schedule, meant the billing schedule. That's when the billing schedule should have occurred, where we changed it to approximately every 30 days like we're talking about, so that we didn't continue to get further out. We didn't continue to get further in arrears from the time it was read to when it was billed. This represents a historical trend, and you can see that as this line indicates up here that goes across the document, you can see that roughly a year ago in 2019, we were less than 30 days in arrears at that particular time. What you can also see, if you look at the information that's on the screen, you can see month by month, between the read and the bill date, the days grew longer from when we actually read to when we billed. So I want to talk about myths that are out there, and I want to talk about the current situation. Money's not lost. We haven't billed yet for it. There is a gap between the read cycle and when we bill. Customers are not being overcharged. I heard what one of our citizens just state, and we'll look into that, and that would be based on the effective rate of when the ordinance went into effect. So we'll look at that specifically, and we'll report back to you on that. Customers are being billed for consumption that is used. There was discussion about cycle 11, and that was a mistake. That should not have gone out. Okay, that bill should not have gone out in cycle 11, where people had 2 monthly due dates in the same month. Shouldn't have occurred. It was not authorized to go out. That bill was not authorized to be sent out, but it did go out. It was a mistake on our part. Shouldn't have occurred. Customer being charged additional fees. There's not been any additional fees charged. There's not been any fees charged above and beyond the actual consumption. We talked about at the last meeting, we talked about the reoccurring credit cards and the auto draft. That is a manual process. And so what we did in the case of the reoccurring credit cards for those folks that were in cycle 12, we've moved that to the 4th of this month. It was originally going to occur on the 25th. It's been moved to the 4th. So people did not have auto drafts taken on the 24th. There's been conversation about this being related to the new meter installation project, and this is not the case. It's a completely separate issue. This is related to the actual delay from the time when we read the meters to when we actually send out the bill. The new meter installation project is going very well. We have right at 29,700 new AMI meters that have been installed. In some cases, those reads, since we're approximately 60 days behind, haven't even been billed as of this date. So again, it's not related to the new AMI meter project. So now I want to delve into the different plan options. Option B, 3230 plan. Option B, which was recommended by a couple of our council members, 3430 plan. Bill the full amount due plan. And then B and C, the hybrid option. Ultimately, we want to get to this point to where the monthly meter reads are on a regular date. So customers, and I'm talking about when this is resolved and we're back into the 10 to 15 days billing after reads. And we'll easily be able to do this with the new AMI process where we actually do a read on a regular scheduled date. And I've talked about this in previous meetings, but I think what's important to note, when we start a read cycle, how it works is now the crew goes out and they drive the different cycles throughout the community and the information is downloaded. In most cases, that takes 1 day. So if we start that on a 28-day time period, the vast majority of the reads in the community are going to take place when we start that. There are going to be some exceptions to that, and we're going to have to go out and reread those. So for those, instead of saying 28 days, it might be 29 days or 30 days. So I just want to make that distinction that long-term with the AMI project, that'll be a much cleaner process where we can actually input the information on the system. It will automatically send out reads, and then we can do the rereads much quicker. We have new meters in the ground, so there'll be less rereads required in the future moving forward. And then ultimately, as I mentioned, we want to get to a place to where the gap is at the industry standard, which is 10 to 15 days from the time that we read to the time that we actually send out the bill. Well, option B, and I think it's important to look at the the third bullet point here and the first bullet point. Option B, going to a 3230 plan, which it'll have minimal impact on the residents. The residents will get their bill on a 30-day basis and their meters will be read. It won't create any negative impact to the citizens because they're going to be billed for the actual consumption that they'll be using during that time period. What we'll do in this case is extend the read cycle from an average of 28 days to an average of 32 days, taking into consideration what I just mentioned a moment ago about when they start the read cycle and then when they do the exceptions. It's very easily executed. It doesn't require a change in anything that we're currently doing. Other than, and I'll talk about this in a minute, it will require an amendment to the tier structure. In regards to this, we will reduce the billing schedule to a 30-day cycle. So every 30 days, we'll send out a bill. And that over time will catch us up. This is a very gradual catch-up plan, and it'll end up catching us up to a 12 to 14-day delay in billing by the end of 2022. So as I just mentioned, there will need to be an adjustment in the tiers, and I'll go into that just a little bit in a little bit more detail in just a few moments to account for what is the potential, because of the longer read cycle, those additional days will have to adjust the tiers in a like amount in order to be able to compensate for the length of the read cycle. So this is option B, 3230 plan, based on the information that we provided you last week. If you look, there's a solid black line down here at the bottom of this. And in this particular case, we get caught up within approximately 30 days by the beginning of 2022. And I want you to remember that in just a couple of moments. Like I said, we'd be caught up in almost all the different cycles by the beginning of 2022, and we would be caught up completely by the end of 2022. And in this particular case, what we would do is we would just move forward with a 32-day read cycle and then a 30-day billing cycle. So we talked about this last meeting, and you had questions about the tiers. If we went to, or let me back up just a little bit. The existing tiers are established for a monthly 30-day read cycle. Option B would move that up to 32 days. And it's important to note that the industry standard is 28 to 32 days with a maximum of 34 days is what's recommended by AWWA. Option B would cause a potential of 7 to 10% of the customers during the high consumption months to potentially be bumped up to another tier. So you asked, and we adjust the tiers to accommodate for that? And the answer is yes, we can do that. If we increase the tier ranges by the same percentage that we've increased the meter read cycle, we'll be able to accommodate for that potential bump into the next tier. So what we would do is, in this particular case, we would just add an additional 4 days on the read cycle, which equates to 14.29%. in the number of days. So what we would do is adjust the tiers accordingly. And that's what this represents here. What this represents is an increase in each tier by the 14.29% rounded up. So it would accommodate for that additional 4 days during the reading cycle. And you can see by each tier that each tier is increased by that 14.29%, again, rounded up. So now I want to talk about which was suggested as the possibility of going to a 3430 plan. And again, there's the black line that's listed on this particular chart, which shows that with a 3430 plan, this means we would extend the read cycle from the current 28 to 34 days. And what that would do is that would catch us up to within 30 days, roughly this time next year. So it would take a year to catch up versus the other plan, which would put us into the beginning of 2022 to get to 30 days, and then end up by the time that on this plan, the 3430, we would be caught up by the end of 2021. This chart shows you a representation of what would happen for cycle 11 between the 3430 versus the 3230. And you can see for this cycle, and it's similar for the other 3 cycles, it's about a 13-month difference between the 2 plans. In order to move forward with a 3430 plan versus a 3230 plan. We would also need to adjust the tiers accordingly to account for the difference in the amount of read, the additional days that were added. And this represents simply adding an additional 6 days, which represents 21.43% increase in the length of the read time. So by increasing the tiers, each individual tier, it would, by that 21.43%, each of the tiers, we would accommodate for those individuals that would be bumped into, possibly be bumped into a higher tier based on the additional length in the read cycle. There was some discussion at the last week's meeting about the option C, pay the full amount due. This would have an immediate financial impact on the customers because they would be required to pay the entire amount that we haven't billed for, plus their current consumption for that time period. So again, customers would be billed for consumption all at one time. This route, we could offer payment plans, and then we would waive delinquent fees as well. We wouldn't have any cutoffs for this particular plan. And also, in this particular plan, the gap from reads to the billing cycle would be reduced almost immediately once we went this particular route. Again, this would have a high impact on our customers. The increased consumption increases the additional amount due for those residents. And by going with the 3230 plan or the 3430 plan, there wouldn't be the need to do that. We would catch up in a period of time, and there's no need to create an additional alarm or concern for individuals that have been paying their bill on a regular basis. It would require a new reading where we would actually have to take from the time when the consumption hadn't been billed. We'd have to go out and do a new read for all of our customers. Depending on when we implemented this, if it was prior to the time when we calculated and the winter quarter average was in effect, we'd have to do the calculation to make sure that that didn't negatively impact the customers on this particular plan. It would also create the need for calculating a tier issue. So if we paid the entire amount off at once, we'd have to look at all the different tiers. We'd have to do a manual deep analysis of each individual tier structure for each individual customer to make sure that nobody was being overbilled for that particular time period. Again, payment plans could be made available 6 months or a year, I think would be preferable. We'd also have to calculate out the base charges, which are the base rate, the garbage fee collection, and then if they're located within inside a MUD, there's also a MUD surcharge involved. So it would be difficult to implement, and right now we have those customers that are in cycle 11 that receive those 2 bills in 1 month, and there's been rightly so concern about that. If you went to a bill the full amount due plan, what's going to happen is if you send 40,000, actually it's 37,000 and some change, our customers, you send them a full amount due plan, we're going to have not only the people that are here, but tenfold that amount concerned about that option when there's no need to do that. The other option that was discussed was a hybrid option, and that's where we basically move forward with a 3230 or a 3430 And then what we do is give residents the option, if they want to come in and pay for the amount due, give them the option to do so. This does create the probability of errors because it's going to require some manual calculations because we're going to have to, I'll talk about that in just a moment. It's going to additionally create additional customer concerns because it's going to put an option out there that, in my opinion, is not necessary and is going to create some additional consternation. Right now, we have people that are calling in and asking about the 25-day billing plan. When is it going to go into effect? We have things that are being stated on social media. So when you add anything in addition to another plan, it's going to create additional concern. It's going to require manual intervention. It's going to require us to create a new bill and read process, and I want to explain that in just a minute. In this particular option, what we would have to do is let people know that by a certain date, if they wanted to find out how much was due, they would have to let us know by that particular date. So there would be would require a response date. It would require an additional manual read where we'd have to go out and read for those customers in particular. So it would create an exception report where we'd have to go out and actually read those. Then what we would also have to do is we would then have to establish for that customer a new reading cycle and a new billing cycle, because if we stayed with a 3230 plan or a 3430 plan, and then we had this option out there, once we did their new read and we created a bill for them, if we didn't create a new read schedule and a new bill schedule for that customer, they're going to fall back in line once the bill goes out for their particular cycle. Yes, they would have a credit on their account, but there would be a delay in time before their next bill was due, and that would be reflective of where they are within the rest of the billing cycle. So we'd have to create a new billing cycle and a new read cycle for that particular customer. I will say that once AMI goes fully, when we implement AMI, this would be much easier to do because we'll be able to do bills and reading electronically, or we'll be able to do the reading portion electronically. So it would be easier, but then you're going to have theoretically these customers scattered throughout the community. Again, it wouldn't be an issue with AMI, but it would be a problem before we went to AMI. Again, it would create the consumption tiering issue that I talked about earlier in the pay all at once. It would create the payment plans, which is a manual process that's implemented into the system. We'd have to adjust the base charge and the various fees that are associated with it and strip that out. And then, again, depending on when it was implemented, we'd have to make sure that the winter quarter average wasn't affected. So, based on all of that information, the most effective plan that will not negatively impact our residents is to go to extend our read schedule from 28 days to either the 32 days and the 34 days and do monthly billings on a 30-day basis. You saw the difference between the 3230 plan and the 3430 plan as far as when we'll catch up. On the 3430 plan, we'll catch up within 30 days a year from now. If we go with the 3230 or the 3430, there's really no need to do delinquent fees or accept payment plans because people will just continue to get their bill like they always have. course, we would, if you chose to do so, we could initiate no cutoffs. And then we would be required to amend the tiers as I described a few moments ago, either the 3230 or the 3430. And that is the next regular item on the agenda. As I mentioned at the last meeting, what we would also recommend is when we look at the fees for this next year, that we look at a complete review of Chapter 30, make sure that based on our practice and practical reasoning, that everything is in alignment with what we're doing and with how you would like to proceed moving forward. Once we get consensus on moving forward, what we would do is we would recommend that we would move forward and go out into the community on a monthly basis. We would go out to each of the cycles and we would do town hall meetings. Every single meeting that we had here at council during a regular meeting, we would come back to you and we would update you, let you know how things are going on the schedule, let you know if there's any issues, the types of customer service calls that are coming in, et cetera. We'd do a press release stating the approved plan. We'd update information on the utility billing webpage. We would provide information on the utility billing inserts. We'd have up-to-date information on the customer service line, as people called the customer service representatives. Provide information in the local paper and also social media on all of our city-owned social media sites. With that information in the record, I'd be pleased to answer any questions you might have.
Why don't we run these down the aisle? Start with Rolando.
Mayor, I think we'll get the rest of the citizens that want to speak on this before we do council discussion.
Okay, you have some questions before we start, yes.
Felicia Ayers, please come up to the podium.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before I spoke the first time, I gave you a handout. I hope each of you have had a chance to read that handout. It is taken from the city's website. The reason why I handed it to you is because this is the third time that I've listened to Mr. Branson make a presentation, and in none of those presentations has he mentioned the double billing to Cycle 14, which is referenced on the city's website, which says, quote from the city's website, "The plan began with billing Cycle 14 on January 31st. Cycle 14 customers received 2 bills dated in January for 2 separate consumption periods. Cycle 11 was billed on February 4th. So, do you think that you've got accurate information to make a decision about anything tonight? My question to you stems from my review of what's happened, but I also want to read to you something else. And this is written by some very highly regarded lawyers talking about what a board's duties are. And I relate to this to you simply because a council is very similar to a corporate board, and since it oversees the business of the city. The board put many controls in place, but the controls were not adequate, and they were not adequately implemented. Some senior members of management did not exercise sufficient oversight and did not respond adequately when issues arose that required a vigorous response. The board assigned the Audit and Compliance Committee an expanded duty to review the transactions, but the committee carried out the reviews only in a cursory way. The board of directors was denied important information that might have led it to take action, but the board also did not fully appreciate the significance of some of the specific information that came before it. Enron's outside auditors supposedly examined Enron's internal controls, but did not identify or bring to the audit committee's attention the inadequacies of their implementation. Now, this is not Enron, but I could have easily substituted the word City of Pearland for many of those that, based upon what I'm hearing right now. And this is one of the reasons why I submit to council that you need an independent investigation, not an audit, an investigation. And the investigation should stem into things like this: whether or not management has adequately disclosed to council the things that it owes a duty to disclose to you. Now, council has a duty of due care, a duty of loyalty, and a duty of good faith. Can you take on those responsibilities without knowing for sure that management has fully disclosed, with candor and without any self-dealing, the information you need to make a decision? Those are questions only you can answer, but everyone sitting in this room is waiting and hoping that you make the right decision, that you make decision based on reliable and credible information. We know now, after tonight's presentation, that Mr. Branson actually knew back in 2018 about the changed 28-day recycle. He said it was a good decision not to change bill date. But he didn't follow the AWWA recommendation of doing an annual audit, and if he did, then he didn't do it well, and he didn't report it to you, and neither did the city manager. This is a 17-year procedure, 17-year procedure that changed the meter read. And what we're hearing from senior management is that not a single person decided to review the consequences of that decision and report it to council. Now, the reasons why that could be either negligence, disregard, or other reasons, but I will submit to council that you do not have all the information you need, and the only way you're going to get it is through an independent investigation.
Thank you, Jimmy Davis.
Jimmy Davis, 5004 Combsville Street, Pearland, 77584. Thank you, Ms. Harris. First and foremost, I got a bill due next week. It's for a meter reading that ended December 19th. I have the new meters. Since then, if you're reading every 28 days, you read my meter on January 16th, February 13th. You're due to read it again March 12th. I'm cycle 12. March 12th just happens to be the second week of the month. The original, before you decide to go to 28 days and bill it every 12, which was a good idea, and that's a load. Before then, you had cycle 11 would be read this week, cycle 12 next week, which the 28 days works out just right next week. Cycle 13, third week, cycle 14, fourth week. You want to know how to fix it? Here's how you fix it. You do the readings like you used to. You send the truck out this Thursday and Friday and read cycle 11. You send them a bill that they'll get that's due in April. You'll read my meter next week. You send me a bill in April. You look at what you billed me last time, which my ending meter reading was 2,400, and you say your new meter reading is 16,000. Hey, Jimmy, you owe me for 13,600 gallons. You bill me at the base $4.06 per 1,000 gallons because it's 2 months worth of consumption. So you bill it at that and you send me a bill and you say, Jimmy, you got two choices. You could pay me now and I'll give you the extra 40 or 50 bucks. It's not going to kill me. But if I can't, you tell me, give me 12 months. And guess what? In April, I'm caught up. And cycle 11's caught up. And cycle 13 and cycle 14, we're caught up. That's how you fix it. You just follow the plan you used to. You implement it starting now. You do away with the 28-day, you go back to the once a week, and we're all caught up, and you give people a payment option. Second thing, council and resident notification. Who did y'all notify? Unfortunately, Trent Perez isn't here. But at the last meeting, Trent Perez said he knew about this in mid-January. He said the council was notified, but I've asked every councilman here, none of them knew. So I'm asking, why is city management going and talking to a former city employee who's now on council, who always defends y'all, no matter what, you can do nothing wrong? Why are y'all notifying him in mid-January and not the rest? You failed in your required notification. You felt it necessary to tell someone, but you only told one. Shame on you. That's incompetence. I too call for a full independent investigation of y'all.
30 seconds.
February 10th, you released a statement. In that statement, as Ms. Harris pointed out, y'all indicated you already implemented the 28-25 plan. You had two bills generated for cycle 11 in January. Cycle 14 got two bills due in February. But the following week, when the fire was lit under your butt, John, you sat right over there where Mr. Hardy is now, and you told us when Adrian Hernandez asked about how a second bill was inadvertently sent, because that was your words, and I heard it inadvertently used again tonight. Wow. You told Adrian that, oh, it was a mistake, it was never supposed to happen. But your February 10th statement said it was. So when did you lie to us? February 10th or February 17th? City Council, I'm asking y'all to bring forth a vote of no confidence in our city manager and deputy city manager. And we're watching y'all. And if y'all won't do it, we'll get people up there at will. There's this little thing called recall. Thank you.
That's all the citizens that wish to speak on this agenda item, Mayor.
They're complete. John, you ready for some comments?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Why don't we start with Orlando at this point? Councilmember.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the opportunity to address this. And of course, want the citizens to know that we take their concerns very seriously, and that they are being seriously considered and addressed. This is something that has caught us off guard as well, and so just want to express that. Something I also want to be a little bit careful mentioning, but just telling you what I can, that there has already been an independent inquiry that has been initiated. We are going to let them complete that unobstructed, and we'll share as appropriate the key findings of that, and take action on that when it's appropriate. But that's what I want to disclose at this point, that we appreciate the severity, and are committed to ensuring that this is handled in a transparent manner. A few questions I wanted to come back to as we try to, on the policy side of this, make sure we get that right and we get that transparent. Could I get a clarification from staff why we would be moving from 30 days versus just the once a month? I think that my understanding is that our go-forward plan would be to do billing once a month. So would that just be an interim thing for 30 days? And since it wouldn't seem to be that different, could we not just make it once a month?
So what's being recommended, the bills are historically sent out on a monthly basis, based on, as I mentioned a while back, or a couple of meetings ago, we used to do the reads, and then within 10 to 15 days afterwards, on a monthly basis, the actual bills went out. We moved up the read cycle, and we've stayed on that monthly billing cycle. And so the reason why we're recommending 30 days is we're in arrears and we're behind the gap from the time that we actually read the meters to when we send out the bills. The 30 days on a regular basis would catch us up over time. So we're just trying to close the gap.
Gotcha. Okay, but then just to be clear, and I believe this is the case from the presentation and everything else I've seen, I mean, the intention is that after whatever catch-up plan we choose is over, we're going to be sending out one bill every month that comes out roughly at the same billing day each month and lags 10 to 15 days behind when the meter was read. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that would be, whatever this temporary stopover is, that it's just that, it's temporary until we get to what I just described. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, great. And so then just a side question. I believe when we've discussed this before, and maybe there was a miscommunication, but I thought that the tiers were set using 30 days of usage, and from just the calculations I'm seeing here, and I think they're the same as last time, but the calculations I'm seeing here, we're changing out a 28-day denominator and saying, oh, so we're going to have if we went to 32 days, that'd be a 14% increase, or 34 days, a 24% increase. Is that
not the case that the tiers are set based on 30 days of usage? They're actually set based on 28?
They are set on 30-day.
Okay.
Currently, they're set on 30 days, but during that, we've been doing 28-day reads, so that's correct.
So I'm sorry, I guess, could you clear that up for me a little bit? So just in order to ensure consistency, since we've been billing on a 28-day cycle and that's how the tiers have been assessed, we're going to increase the amount from 28. I guess what I'm saying is it seems like the tiers should be raised by a lesser amount from 30, an increase of 30 to 32 or 34 days rather than 28 days to 32 days, if that makes sense.
Sure, I'm going to let Mr. Epperson respond on that.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Branson. We did look at, initially taking it from 30 days to either the 32 or the 34. But I think we felt because we've been about 18 months on this 28-day cycle that any impact, we would want to take it from that to make sure there was not any impact from what we've been doing for the past 18 months, just to ensure that no one went into the next tier based on the longer read cycle.
But to be clear, I mean, when I look at the numbers, that actually would allow probably more leniency for the customer, would give them a bigger buffer.
What's proposed allows a bigger buffer than
Right.
if we'd gone
Okay,
from 30
so you just,
yes, sir.
in light of everything, I think I'm comfortable with that. Just wanted to make sure I understood the rationale. And then I guess the last question, we talked a little bit about, something that I proposed last meeting, which was the binary plan that would enable you, if you so chose, to make a full payment up front, that would be possible with AMI. I guess just what is the timeline for that AMI would be implemented to the point at which people who chose to do so could figure out the exact amount that is in arrears, and if they wanted to, just write a check and take care of that.
I'll take that one as well, sir. So we have we're approaching 30,000 of our approximately 38,000 meters being changed out. And we're going to start having we've got the communication network will start going up here in the next few weeks. There's some additional towers that are being manufactured right now that'll have to go up. So we should have a test area to start that in about the April timeframe. Once that tests out and everything passes and all the protocols are gone through, then we'll start implementing that throughout. So we think that sometime this summer, by the end of the summer, we should be on target for having the AMI fully functional and tested out. May take a little bit more just to make sure we work out all the bugs and tweak everything out since it is a new system and there's a lot that's gone into it. But we're approaching that sometime this year, hopefully this summer.
Gotcha. Okay, so thank you for that. And so, Mr. Mayor, just to conclude my thoughts, I think the biggest thing here is for there to be transparency, and that we need to heal the trust that has been damaged. And so in order to do that, I think there's 2 points. It's the conclusion of the independent inquiry that we've discussed, as well as the option, as soon as it becomes possible with our technology, I would ask that be expedited to the extent possible and made a priority, to give people an option to see when that is implemented, what the amount in arrears, their amount in arrears is in total, and have the ability to be able to take care of that. Because I've heard loud and clear at these meetings and also in the community that there's a lot of people who want that level of transparency of exactly what what amount is in arrears and have the ability to take care of that. So I think that those are the right steps. We can get towards that ideal end state of knowing exactly how we got here and being in a position to everybody gets one bill a month. It's lagging in a reasonable time behind when it closed out, and I think that we can put this behind us at that point. So thank you.
Carbone?
Thank you, Mayor. In my mind, I break it down to 3 sections. What happened in the past, and as Councilman Orlando mentioned, we have called for an independent third-party investigation. That's the fair and right thing to do. They're going to be interviewing current staff and former staff. So until we know what happened, we can't, it might feel good to let all the staff go. Can't do it. It's not fair. But once we do have facts that we can rely upon in the form of an independent third-party inquiry, then we can take action on what's happened in the past, and as soon as possible turn those reports and all that open to the public so y'all can see and hold us accountable for what's going on. The second thing is we got to correct. None of us like it, but we're in this mess now. We've got to get it right going forward. I like the 3230 option. I would like utility billing to be prepared to field phone calls, so if you do want to call and know what your full arrear balance is, then we can provide that. But I think the 3230 option makes the best sense, adjusting the tiers, make sure that nobody is effective in a punitive way. And then controls going forward, we've got to make sure, and when that's being addressed, I think once the inquiry comes back, once we get this plan in place, then the final option or final topic is what controls were in place, how did they fail, what controls do we need to have, why did it take 2 years for our independent auditors to catch this? So I mean, it was a failure across the board, and what are we doing to put controls in place to catch not only this, but other issues going forward in the future? So that's my thoughts, Mayor.
Councilor Little?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sure I'm not the only one up here that in times like these, we ask ourselves, what were we thinking? I support option B for a couple of reasons. It has the least impact on our citizens. It has the opposite effect of what got us here. When we switched to the 28-day billing, we just kept getting further and further behind on the collecting on what had already been used. This way, billing 34 days in arrears per month will gradually get set up 32 or 34. If we go to 34, then we obviously close that gap quicker. And it's also the easiest to implement, as Mr. Branson has demonstrated. And in fairness, if the 32 or 34 days bumps you up into a higher tier, we're going to adjust the tiers by 14.23% interest, which is the difference in the 34 or the 32 in the 28-day cycle. I know a lot of people think they've been overbilled. If you, in fact, received more than 12 bills in the year and you were charged the base rate more than 12 times, then you deserve a credit for that base rate amount you paid. But everything else you've been billed, even if you received 13 bills, is based on your past consumption. To the best of my knowledge, no one has been intentionally overbilled for their consumption. So, and as Councilman Carbone and Councilman Orlando have mentioned, there is going to be a third-party investigation. Give that time to play out and then hold us accountable for doing our job. Right now, we don't have the answers either. We're not going to put people on the chopping block when we don't know what happened. So just be patient with us. There may have been some bad decisions made, but I don't think anyone intentionally tried to do harm to any of the citizens or there was any nefarious acts going on. Bad management decisions possibly, but nothing intentionally was done to harm the citizens. So that's all I have for now, Mayor. So just bear with us, please.
To complete, Councilman Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Couple questions to staff. AWWA best practice is the 28 to 32-day bill cycle. What was it that caused us to go to the 28-day bill cycle when that's at the bottom of the tier of the requested time period.
To create a more consistent read, as I mentioned earlier, you have the initial read on that first day, and it can take, in most cases, it takes a day, assuming there's not weather, there's not other issues that affect it. It could take as much as a day and a half. That won't be the case with AMI, but it can take that long. And then you also have the exception bills, and how that works is the information is downloaded, the files generated, and it will show a list of all of those reads that did not take place. So then a work order is generated, and then the crew has to go out and reread those meters. In some cases, it's just a simple matter of going and waking up that meter. In other cases, it's a little bit more work. So it can take an extended period of time, sometimes, to get all the reads in. So if you move it to the 28-day time period, then you've accomplished everything within that acceptable standard.
So basically within a 30-day period.
In most cases, yes.
Okay. I spoke on this before, and I see that we do our read dates on Thursday, Friday. I still adamantly request that we move to a Wednesday, Thursday schedule, so that gives you an extra day in the week to make up for any reads that need to be done and would not throw you too far off schedule, be it holidays, weather, whatever the issue is. Because if you can't get it read on Friday, I'm pretty sure nobody's coming out on Saturday to do it. So then it pushes it to Saturday, Sunday, and then back to Monday. So that just increases the time period. So I really want to see that move to a Wednesday, Thursday read schedule for each cycle for each week. Another question here. And then as far as like the safeguards on this, I really find it hard to believe that it took so long for us to discover this. What safeguards were in place, if any at all, to monitor this and to possibly catch it?
So one of the things that you receive on a monthly basis is a variance report that shows you what the actual consumption is for a given month, how it compares to the budget, and how it compares to the previous year. So you see that information on a regular basis. So as was mentioned, those can fluctuate greatly depending on weather, but how the information ultimately was provided to me was going through IT on the back end and going back and getting a historical report of the actual read dates and bill dates. Moving forward, we would guarantee that particular schedule for the read and the bill dates. As I mentioned, we report on a regular basis. And that's how we would stay, in line moving forward from this point forward. We've also worked internally to where any adjustment to the schedule must be approved by the Director of Finance before any schedule change can take place. And then that information would be communicated throughout the organization and on up if there was a significant change made in the schedule.
I don't know about anybody else, but as a council member, I would want council to know before we made any kind of change that's going to drastically affect any customers. Something like this was a big deal. It might not have seemed like it was a big deal at the time, but here we are. Simply changing a couple days on a read cycle or a bill cycle put us into a serious issue. So I think if we're going to have any kind of major changes like that, that's something that council should have a say in. One other question I had on the meter implementation. So why would we put all the meters in first before we had the towers and the equipment to actually be able to read those meters? Why did we do the meters first before we did all the towers and all of that?
Good evening, Councilman Moore. The meters are being installed through normal protocols, but they are in the what's called drive-by mode. So we have a pack in the car, just like under the existing protocol with the current meter system, that drives by and reads the meters the same way, while we're working on getting the antennas up, getting the equipment that is necessary for remote reads through or real-time reads in place. But it's under normal protocol. It's a drive-by system. That's those endpoints and those meters can be read that way, and then when they're ready, they'll be flipped over to the system.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I too, along with council members I already spoke, very happy that we're doing the third-party audit, whatever you want to call it, to get some answers, to get to the bottom of this. I'm in favor of any plan that can get us caught up sooner than later, but has a payment plan for any residents that so choose to do so. There's some people that are on fixed incomes, may get that huge bill, may not be able to handle that. So, I mean, I think we have to have a payment option. There is, I don't think we have any other choice in that, to be fair to all the residents. And I also think that if you want to come in and pay the whole amount, then you should be able to come in and pay the whole amount and get it behind you and we move forward. So I would be in favor of any plan that would get us to that point. So that's all I have, Mayor.
You know, when you sit in the last one down here, everything's been said. You know, I like that. A couple of things. Felicia, I appreciate you being here tonight. You hadn't lost anything since you left off council. You're still rough as ever. So, but I appreciate all your words you said. And Jimmy, you're correct on what you said. I'm one of the council members here in the Erstas Council. We found out about it at the same time that others found about it, you know, just sitting here. So I just want to lay it out there. Going to the meters, you brought up a good point. When we take a meter out and put the new meter in, do we read the old meter and adjust it for the new meter coming in, or how's that handled, Trent?
We take a reading off the old meter, and then, of course, the new meter, we take a reading off of that. So when, during the month where the meters changed out, they're billed for the consumption on the old meter that's read, and then the consumption for the new meter that's read for that portion of the month.
Okay, so if the meter's changed out and you read the consumption on the old meter, and it comes up to the billing cycle, you probably don't have what the new meter consumption is to add to that, do you? Or does that go on the next billing cycle?
No, if their billing cycle, if the meters change out during their billing cycle, part of the consumption's from the old meter and part of the consumption's from the new meter, but it's the entirety of the consumption for that read period.
Okay, so the old meter and the consumption on that goes into a system that's read and held there until you get the billing cycle for the new one, and then it's added to it, and that way?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The other side is, I'm in cycle 11, so I'm the guy that gets 2 bills and so for the month. So I don't know, I didn't pay that much attention to the second one, so I don't know if I was charged again for the trash on the second one. But I did get 2 bills since I'm in cycle 11. So having said that, if I got 2 bills and I paid both of them already, am I ahead of the system right now, or do I still owe you something else for something since I paid 2 bills?
So in cycle 11,
Yeah.
You received that second bill went out on 2/4, and then your next bill will not go out until 3/13.
Okay. All right, so I'm not even right now, then I'm still just got 2, paid for 2 of them. Okay, well, that's one of the things that, more that you brought up is that I had a concern with on changing the meters out, reading the meters, and did we take the adjusted amount off the old meter and, put it in at someplace, and then the billing for the new meter, at that time, we add those two together and send it out. For my part on here, option B is still the one I'd like to see, but again, like some of the council members have said, if somebody wants to figure out, or the department figure out on here, what the total amount is for somebody, and they want to pay it, all up in one time, that's perfectly fine, I guess, to do that. I believe, this took us a little while to get into this mess. I wish we could wave a wand and get it out this next week and get it over with on there to see that, but it looks like it's we're a year or so into this to get it finalized. But I would say that, talking to the staff here, that, anything that we can do to expedite this, I think that needs to be done. And I see that, on this, on that particular statement that we're looking at, that, the part on this is, that we want to make sure that we catch it back up. Want to make sure that nobody pays any additional money that they're not supposed to pay on there. They're not charged any fees that they shouldn't pay for in the fee part of it. So I think, waiting for that, and there's no sense in me repeating the stuff that the other council members say about the legal aspect of it. But we do want to get to the bottom of it. This is not something that we're that proud of, and that's for sure. Like I told, some people earlier that, the staff has the people that they're over and they're working with staff, but the one sitting up here, ours is 130 people sitting out there that we report to. And so I'm glad personally that you are coming up here to speak and make the statements that you are on this. It's a concerning thing for all of us, and we'd like to put it behind us and get it out of the way and do it in a way that nobody comes out that is definitely hurt on this, or additional money out. But even though that we're doing that, I hope, that there are things that within this new system that we can find this, and we're not knowing about it 2 years later that the wrong billing was done on it. So, Mayor, that's pretty well all I have. I'm just glad to see people coming out, and I'm glad to see the staff looking at trying to get it done, and I hope we get to the bottom of it. And I appreciate you coming in and talking to us earlier today, being a city staff member that left and went out. But I'm glad you came and made your statement and told us about it today also. So I thank you for that too.
Okay, I appreciate that. I watched the contractor put my new water meter in. It's a high-fidelity water meter, and they pulled the old one out, and I looked at it, and I thought, we've been around a long time together. Come on, the thing's older than probably some of you out there. But the idea was to put new meters in the over 40,000 meters that we have. Some of those, we heard about the problems that they caused with somebody had a meter go out on them and had a lot of problems. And so we had this opportunity to realize that we need to change those things out. They just they're not working too well, which we did. And we're pretty well to the end of the cycle of installing to date. But I don't think that the results that we went through with the meter reading and the cycling, it probably is not our shining hour. And it's something we feel very proud about, but it's something we realize has happened. It was not a conspiracy of anybody deliberately trying to sabotage the system and the citizens. And I had 3 bills on my one last bill, and 3 different charges. And I looked at the numbers, and I knew that probably what had happened. We didn't get the water meters read after they were put in the right cycle. So it's something that these things happen. It's not what we look forward to doing. It's not an individual who deliberately tried to sabotage the system. But I think we're trying to work through we're a city of 150,000 people now, and we've grown, and we've still a lot of growth to do. And it's just, you get a lot of roads to put in, and a lot of water meters to put in, and a lot of putting in a library and fire stations to try to build a city and serve it. But I think in the final analysis, none of the charges that I received, I was charged exactly what I used in water, so I was not cheap. Added an extra little amount of money, we collected a little on the side in the process of billing. It's something that we don't usually run into, but it happened. I think it's something we got to realize that sometimes happens in an organization. New as we are, and but trying to upgrade the facilities to provide the best service possible for our citizens. But in the final analysis, I think we're approaching it in an organized fashion. I think we're coming up with a solution that we'll work our way out of this like we plan to do, and I think it will be one that you'll be satisfied with. I know that I will be. And I'm kind of critical about things, but I also realize that things happen. And this happened, and it's just not really something to really brag about. But we're working on it. I think staff has come up with what would be a solution to provide us in the future and work through the process. And I'm hoping that all of you will just hang with us. We're trying to do what is best for us, and it's nothing. It's not a malicious event, and it's not something that is a conspiracy event. So we're trying to resolve something that we don't run into these type of things on our roadways, and we don't run into these type of things on other type of service in the city. But it's something that has happened. Let's work it through. Let's work with the city. I think our staff has come up with some possible, I think, the right solutions to resolve the problem. And once we get back on the schedule, I'm like you. I'm a creature of habit. I like that bill to be there every month at the same time. And so we're going to try to put them back at the same time again. So when we do that, I think you'll find that we'll do that without you being charged for water you didn't use. So I think it's something we're trying very hard to work with. Our council may need to make a few extra comments at this point, perhaps.
In hopes to wrap it up, I didn't hear any objections to going with option B on the 3230 plan. I guess with the caveat of utility billings prepared to field calls if someone wants to call in and pay. I know staff still needs to figure out the details of that. But I think from a direction at the end of this meeting is to proceed with the 3230. I guess I'll put that out there if anybody disagrees. And then the final thing is we're still hearing, like Ms. Haas, with the 12 and a half base charges the past 2 years. I guess there's still some little issues out there that as staff has heard them through the public comments, if y'all would work on addressing those for the next round, just because it's the right thing to do, and the trust is gone. The only way we rebuild it is addressing those issues, getting to the bottom of them. That's all I had, and hopefully that gives staff some clear direction.
Yeah, at this point, transparency is key.
I guess one of the last things, Mayor, that I'd like for John to give us a statement. When are we going to have our next meeting? Are we going to have an update at that time, or what?
That would be our next regular city council meeting at the end of this month. I believe it's the 23rd.
The council have any other questions? John, are you getting answers that you want at this point?
Mr. Mayor, I believe I
Guidance.
got consensus from the council, the 3230 plan.
Okay, what else?
And then if residents ultimately call in and they want to find out the information that is due, that we work on a system to provide that.
If any of the other council members would agree or disagree with me, we have a joint public hearing on the 16th. Could we do a special meeting just for the water billing piece prior to or after that public hearing? Instead of waiting until the 23rd to do it?
If we could do it, I think that'd be a good time for us to go ahead and do it.
Yep, I agree.
Rolando?
And then I just wanted to ask, when would be the appropriate time to make the motion? We discussed earlier something just about waiving cutoffs or just being a little bit more flexible as we go to this transitionary billing period.
At the current time, we are not doing any cutoffs where there's no additional fees added to late bills, et cetera. So we're currently doing that at this time.
Gotcha. So that
And-
no action would be needed to maintain that policy for,
That's correct until you wanted us to change that.
gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Little?
One more thing, I anticipate we might have a large volume of phone calls once we implement whatever it is we come up with, 3230. Can we increase the staff in water billing to handle the increase in phone calls? So people
We've,
aren't on hold and properly train them on how to respond?
Yes, sir, we can do that. We've actually are in the process of doing that right now. We also are working on a video, depending on the ultimate decision, that will help explain the situation that we can direct people to and talk about the plan moving forward.
Thank you. On the 16th, I don't know if I'll be back in time. Had a hearing out of town that morning, so.
Okay. Tony, did you have a wrap-up comment?
So is there consensus for the 16th? Okay, so the 16th, a special meeting?
Yes, sir.
Any other comments from the council at this point? John, I think you have at least shared some good points with us, and what I'm going to do, we've been working on this since about, as a council, since about 5 o'clock. And some of the guys here shouldn't be drinking all these cups of coffee, but I think I'll take about a 5-minute break at 8:20. The council has returned to open session at 8:35. Moving to item number 2, new business. Councilmember Carbone, would you?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration possible action, first reading of ordinance 1358-19. And I'd like to read in the 3230 plan into this motion as discussed in new business item number 1.
Second.
Second. A motion and a second. So we're discussion, staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As discussed at in the workshop just a few moments ago, what we would recommend on first reading is that you amend the tiers in the non-development fee ordinance to represent the 3230 plan, which is an increase which is an increase in the length of time for the actual tiers themselves. And click share. And this is what the tiers would now look like as amended by the percentage that we discussed earlier. Each tier, the base tier would go from 0 to 2,000 to 0, 2,290. The second tier would go from 2001 to 6,002, 2,291 to 6,860. Third tier from 6,001 to 15,002, 6,861 to 17,150, and then 15,001 to 25,000 for the that tier, all the way up to 17,151 gallons to 28,580 gallons, and everything in the bottom tier would be bumped up to 28,580 gallons from the 25,000 gallons. We would also do the same thing on the commercial tier where it would be adjusted likewise, and you have that information in the non-development fee ordinance before you, and we would recommend approval of this on first reading.
Yeah, just a quick question on my end. Do we know just roughly for a residential user what the average monthly water bill is or has been?
Yes, we actually took a look at that last week as we were putting a lot of this information together. And we took about a 2-year average, and the average consumption for water is about a little over 5,500 gallons per month. And then the average sewer winter quarter average is about 4,450 gallons per month.
And do you have just what that translates to in a dollar figure?
Sure. So under the existing tiers, $65.05. By modifying the tiers to the 3230 plan, that would move up. The estimate on their water gallon consumptions would go from that 5,518 to approximately 6,307 with the additional 4 days. With the modified tiers, that would change their bill to $65.62, which is about a 57-cent increase.
Gotcha. I guess I'm a little confused there how it's only 57 cents more when they're getting billed for 4 additional days on average. Even moving up the tiers, you're still paying for 4 additional days. It's the tier thing, just make sure you don't get into an overage charge.
Sure. So one of the things is that the tiers are for the water and the sewer. Those aren't separated out in the fee, and so it would modify the tiers for the sewer as well. And since that since that's billed on the winter quarter average, it actually drops that part of the rate a little bit. So we looked at whether or not that made sense, and we think because with the 3230 plan, we'll be going through the winter quarter average next year on the longer reading cycle, then it makes sense to go ahead and make that change overall. And although that, there will be a little bit of reduction in the cost for the sewer side now, When that winter quarter average is reestablished next year in the December through February timeframe, then that is going to go up because it's over a longer read period. And so those tiers will be able to reflect that and not impact them.
Gotcha. Okay, so just to confirm I'm hearing you correctly, it's accurate to say that, of course, a lot of variations based on usage, whatever, but the average, if someone is using the average amount of water today, their average monthly bill is $65.05, and under the new plan, that would, the average would be $65.62. It'd be only a 57-cent increase?
Yes, sir. And that's, of course, on that average bill. And, larger users are going to see, much more, they're going to see a bigger difference because I guess the impacts of the reduction for an average user on the sewer side, that starts to diminish when they get much over that, 5,000.
Sure. So what I expected the answer to be more like was that we're adding 14% more days, and that so people's bills would be roughly 14% more. And it was kind of in that line of thinking that made me want to do the 3230 plan versus the 3234, because I don't want to bump people's bills up necessarily on average by 21%, even though that gets us there 13 months faster. But what I'm hearing is there's almost no increase to the average bill by going to a 3230. Did you do the numbers on what the 3430 would look like?
Yes, sir. So with the 34-day consumption instead of 32, that would bump the consumption up to about 6,700 on the water side. We held the sewer because it's held at winter quarter average until the next cycle where we set that. So that results in a bill of 65.96, so about a 91-cent increase. Just maybe to put a little perspective around, if you look at somebody whose consumption is closer to 10,000, they're going to see, going to the 32-day plan, approximately $3.50 and $5.40 or so going to the 34 plan. So someone with a larger usage, they'll see a larger impact on a monthly basis.
Sure, but still, you're talking about for someone a very high user having maybe a $3 or $4 difference based.
Yes, I may not characterize somebody around 10,000 gallons as a very high user, but a moderate, medium.
Gotcha. Sorry, Whitney.
No. You get into some of the higher users that hit the highest tiers, and they're gonna see, $10 and $15.
But on relatively higher amounts, much higher amounts, right?
Much higher amounts.
So, I'm just saying this is really, I'm very surprised to see if that's correct, that the sewer offsets it that much. But if we're talking about a difference from, we can get this solved 13 months faster by making the average bill $65.91 versus $65.62. I think that's the obvious option, if the rest of the council agrees.
Just one question on that. The commercial rates, could we get some examples on what that would be for a commercial? Because I know they're going to be much higher. They're already at a much higher base rate, and then consumption-wise, they're drastically different.
So on the commercial side?
Before you answer that,
Yes, sir.
just for the record, we did have one citizen that wanted to speak on this agenda item, but she left before we called this item. So, and that would be Felicia Harris.
So on the commercial and multi-unit volumetric rates, we only have two tiers. We have the base rate, 0 to 2,000, and then the 2001 plus. So that would modify to basically 2430, 0 to 2430 in the base rate, and then 2431 plus under the 32-day plan.
I hear what Councilman Orlando's saying. I guess where's that gap made up? In terms of, we hear this $6 million gap, and now we're talking about 50 cents per meter, or 50 cents per month. We run it out for 2 years, that's $12. That times 40,000 meters, that doesn't get me to a $6 million gap?
The $6 million is already used consumption that just hasn't been billed.
Right.
Right.
But if we're trying to close that gap over 50 cents a month for the next 24 months, that's $12 per household, on average household. So,
I mean, the gap we're trying to close is the amount of time between when we read the meters and when we actually bill. It's, you know, so those dollars will come in as that is billed.
right, but not at 50 cents. I mean, I guess if that's the correct for the average residential, then we need to warn the commercial customers, because they're going to be the ones making up the bulk of that. So I guess to Councilman Orlando's point, good point, but let's see how that plays out across all the spectrum before we.
And I don't have any specific examples of commercial properties, but we can have those ready for next week.
Yeah, I definitely.
I think what we're seeing here is the impacts of where the winter quarter average is set for residential right now. And that a year from now, when that's reset with the new tiers, that's when a lot of that, that'll make up for some of that. And you'll see that would create a larger difference in the bills, but as they stand right now, where their winter quarter average is.
And also, we're talking about averages and not actual cost of the, so.
So what we can share out between this week and when we bring back the ordinance for the second reading is we can share out specific examples, as well as, we've got some sample bills of actual customers. We can run specific examples of people, right near the top of the tiers to show that they don't enter the next tier, and kind of the impacts on from the sewer side as well. And then we can also provide some for commercial properties.
Great.
Thank you.
Council have any response or questions?
I guess the other thing is, what's the budgetary impact? Because we passed a budget based on this fee schedule. So have we worked up what that looks like? Essentially, we're discounting water across the board. So wouldn't that also require an offsetting budget amendment?
We'd have to, I don't think we have that specific information at this time. We can do a calculation for you when we report the next time. We can present that to you.
Thank you.
This is, again, the adjustment was to try and make it as cost neutral across the board as possible by adjusting at the same amount of time as the actual additional tiers. By the same amount of time for the additional days and reads. But as Mr. Epperson said, we can provide you with some specific examples so you can see how it will actually affect, and then we can provide you with an estimate as far as what that means in dollar-wise.
Any other question or comment for council?
Since we're account on an accrual method, hasn't the billing already been accounted for, or the consumption? And it would just be, as far as the revenue collected, wouldn't it be like a variance explanation?
So we do accrue, historically, we've always accrued the revenues anywhere from approximately 15 days to 30 days in arrears based on the time that the bill is due. So if you're asking, in this particular situation, it would be the same thing, but I think what Councilmember Carbone is saying is, what is the actual difference based on this calculation? We would still get the money in. It's just by adjusting the tiers, is there any difference in what we would actually receive financially versus what we would have otherwise?
Councilman Owens?
Yeah, I've just got one question, and then I don't think Mr. Gray's here, but he's the one that asked it, and I told him I'd pass it along. And he was wondering why on his water bill, that his water, he had used so much water, but his sewer was a larger consumption, about 2,000 gallons, than what his water consumption was.
So what we do is we currently calculate their sewer rate based on their winter quarter average. And that winter quarter average is from December, January, and February. And then it is set based on their actual consumption during that time period. So during months where they don't use as much water, that could be the case where their base rate is higher, not their base rate, but what they pay appears to be lower than their actual consumption. So that is, it's based on the winter quarter average, and it's set for the entire year.
He'll be back this next week, you tell him.
So if the winter quarter average for a given house is 3,000 gallons, and then we get into summer and for some reason they only use 2,500, are we still charging for 3,000?
That's correct. It's set at that one rate the entire time.
Yeah. Is that fair? I mean, I get the whole winter quarter average in theory to help out during the summer months, but is that not penalizing some folks?
So that is the tier, that is the structure we have in place. That is something that we could potentially look at. We could look at that as a cap, for example, so that would be their rate if they went up to, that would be a cap. So we can look at that as an option moving forward.
Yeah, I'd like to do that, 'cause I guess that was my assumption from the beginning. It sounds like wrongfully so, that we build the lesser of the winter quarter average or the actual usage. It sounds like that's not the case.
That's correct. It's the way the ordinance reads is that it's set, and it's set at that rate for the entirety of the year.
Okay, I'd like to revisit that.
And I think we can. One of the things, kind of like what the other thing we're looking at here, that we need to take a look in the rate model, what the impacts of that are.
And that was one of the things, I think we need to look at the entire ordinance itself when we look at the rates again, because one, we're going to have to adjust the rate model. And then this may be one of those examples that you might, from a policy standpoint, say, no, that's a cap versus an actual amount throughout the entire time period.
Yeah, to get the winter rate for sewage is kind of a little bit off the record, I think. We get I've gotten a lot of complaints that this is the wrong time of year to do your calculation for your sewage on there, because it falls into a higher calculation than it would if you did it in another time period within the year. So we could take a look at that. I think that'd be a good opportunity to do it, since we're doing all this other, just to take a look at that, see if that's the right time to do it.
Sure, I think we can take a look at the average monthly numbers and make sure that the months we're using are the, on average, lowest consumption numbers or months.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, Councilman Carbone pointed out that somebody could actually build a little more on the sewer side than their winter average. Couldn't the flip side also be true, that somebody would use more than their average and would benefit from it?
Absolutely, and I think that's been the argument, that I think that's why it's in place the way that it is, because it can go both ways.
I think and the expectation is that you take that winter quarter average in the lowest consumption months. So in the summertime, when somebody is watering their yard and their consumption, their winter quarter average is maybe set at 3,000, they're watering their yard and they're using 12 or 15,000 gallons of water, then that's not going in the sewer system. So we don't want to charge them for not treating water that they're using. So we yes, sir. So you said it when you assume just about all the consumption is going into the sewer system and we're having to treat that water.
So this is something that people opt for, though, right? I'm not incredibly familiar with this, but people opt for whether or not they want to do this? Or no, is this just
No, sir.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I like the idea of revisiting that, with Chapter 30, specific winter quarter average.
Any other question or comment at this point by council? Madam Secretary, I believe we have a motion second on the floor here.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Little? Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Councilmember Orlando?
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Moving in our agenda to new business item number 2, Councilmember Little.
I think we're on number 3, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, first reading of ordinance number 2000M-198. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item represents proposed amendments to the Rice Dryer Commercial Park PD to allow an 18,000 square foot farm store, a supply store, and outdoor storage within the PD. Staff does recommend approval. The Planning and Zoning Commission voted in favor 5-0 of the proposed amendments. And with that information, we'd be pleased to answer any questions you might have.
Council, have any question or comment on the staff report?
Mayor, if I could just provide one clarification. When the Planning and Zoning Commission approved this, they did make a proposed amendment to it, and that amendment was to limit the sale of animals to those animals that are only permitted to be sold in the city, because I think there was some discussion about their ability to sell chicks and things at certain times of year. And so they wanted to have that limitation that it's only those that are allowed to be sold in the city. That is not contained in the ordinance as presented to the council. So if the council would like to include that amendment, the motion that's been made would have to be amended accordingly. Thank you.
What animals other than chickens are allowed to be sold in the city?
I don't recall off the top of my head all the animals that are allowed, but chapter 6-30, I think, has all the prohibited animals. The only animal that I'm aware of that Tractor Supply actually sells that is prohibited by the city ordinance would be guinea fowl. And I don't know if guinea fowl is a big item on their thing, but that was one that their corporate website said that they sell that is prohibited by our city ordinance.
Would that be superfluous to prohibit them from selling something that's already prohibited, or?
No, I think essentially, yeah, they can only sell animals that were sold in the city, but they wanted to make sure that that was a requirement placed on that specific location as part of the PD. But they would be able to sell any animal at that particular location that you could sell in the city, regardless of whether or not the PD was amended.
Since it's an ordinance already, I don't think we need to amend the PD, do we?
Well, guinea's a chicken. Very loud chicken.
Correct. But because guineas are, I think the point being, if guineas are prohibited in the city, they would not be able to be sold in that PD, regardless of whether that amendment is made.
Right. Thank
You. Any other comment by council at this point? Hearing none, Madam Secretary, I believe we got a motion on the floor here.
Councilmember Little? Aye. Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Councilmember Orlando?
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, Councilmember Moore, item number 4.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration possible action, first reading of ordinance 2000M-201. So moved.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council. This item represents proposed amendments to the center at Pearland Parkway plan development, including 0-foot side setbacks to accommodate a retail building on an existing pad site attached to the south side of the Academy Sports and Outdoors building. Staff does support the overall amendments, and the Planning and Zoning Commission also voted in favor of this 5-0.
Okay. Council having a question or comment on staff report?
We didn't have any negative reports on that at all, responses.
We didn't have any, no comments were received by staff of a negative nature. That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Are any other comments from council at this point? Madam Secretary, I believe we have a motion second on the floor for item 4.
Councilmember Moore,
Aye.
Councilmember Owens,
Aye.
Councilmember Orlando,
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone,
Aye.
Councilmember Little.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Moving to business items 5, Councilmember Owens.
Consideration possible action, first reading of ordinance number 2000M-199. I so move.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. In discussion, staff report on this item.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This is a zoning change request from single-family residential R3 district to general commercial GC district. The designated change is to accommodate a retail development of a 28,000 square foot strip retail center at 3429 Main Street. Staff recommends approval of the request, and again, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted in favor of the proposed change.
Council have any question or comment on staff report? Hearing none, Madam Secretary, I believe we have motion second on the floor for item 5.
Councilmember Owens,
Aye.
Councilmember Orlando,
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone,
Aye.
Councilmember Little, Councilmember Moore.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Moving in our agenda to item number 6, Councilmember Orlando, would you present this for our consideration?
Consideration and possible action, first reading of ordinance 2000M-200. So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second on the floor. We're in discussion. Staff report.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The purpose of this item is consideration of a zone change from single-family residential R4 district to light industrial M1. The request is to rezone a 3.8 acre parcel of a larger 8.430 acre tract east of 4155 South Main to allow the entire property to be developed and/or sold under a single zoning district. Staff does recommend approval of this request, and again, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 5-0 in favor of the proposed change.
Council have any question or comment on staff report?
Mayor, I guess one comment for maybe people watching at home. We've went through all these in a joint public hearing, so we're blowing through them tonight, but we've already seen them commented, and that was my comment.
Okay.
And I'll just make one short comment. I'm not always in favor of giving up property to be residential that was M1 or GC or GB. So it's good to see some residential property given up to be commercial or M1 to get some more businesses and companies into the city. So as long as they're not impacting residential areas, I think that's a good thing and glad to see it.
Okay. Any other comments from council?
The only other thing, and Councilmember Carbone mentioned about, we had talked about these in a special meeting, but also this is a first reading of the ordinance. First reading it with it.
Okay. Any further comments or questions? Madam Secretary, I believe we have a motion second on the floor for item number 6.
Councilmember Orlando,
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone,
Aye.
Councilmember Little, Councilmember Moore,
Aye.
Councilmember Owens.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Okay, moving to item 9, mayor council issues for council discussion. There were none. Item 10 is new other business. There is none. Item 11 allows me to adjourn at 9:04. Thank all of you for hanging in here with us, and we appreciate your being here.